Thomas Thierst videos are brought to you by my Patreons and viewers like you. Thank you. Can you believe it has been 10 years since Tale of the Brave came out? Crazy how time flies. And so since it's been a decade since this movie came out, and since it's October, aka the spooky month, I felt it was only right to revisit this modern classic movie. So when Thomas discovers big footprints at the clay pits, Percy starts to think monsters are real and becomes scared. But with a little bit of help from Gator, Percy finds the courage in himself to be brave and save James from a rock slide. Now, take everything I say here with a pinch of salt, but with all that out of the way, gather around the campfire this Halloween night as we look at the things you missed in Tale of the Brave. Let's begin. So the movie opens on this shot of a frog. This frog becomes a reoccurring bit in the movie. The frog is seen when we first see Gator, it's seen again when the Monsters Everywhere song, and the frog is seen jumping off James when he has his crash. As to what it represents in the story, I'll leave that up to you to decide. This is also the only special to take place in autumn. Most other Thomas specials take place in summer or spring, so the fact that this special takes place in autumn makes it feel extra special, and helps establish a unique, spooky Halloween tone. This was the castle tunnel and Oliver's first appearance in CGI. The tunnel would look much closer to how it did in Series 3, while Oliver's model is a whole other story. Also, for some reason Toad doesn't appear as a Break fan despite him being in Series 18. Weird. The animators here have also improved from Series 17. Things like the flags blowing in the wind, or the overall tone, or the lighting have been improved, or even things like the framing of the camera becoming much more dynamic, such as POV shots compared to King of the Railway. The opening music that plays here is the same music that's played at the end of the movie. Thomas being forced to work at the clay pits because of a broken bridge on his branch line,
which was closed for repairs to a damaged bridge,
is very similar to the Railway series book Thomas and the Twins, where a weight restriction is put on the Elves Bridge, and so Thomas has to work with Bill and Ben, similar to this movie. This is the first time we see the clay pits in full CGI. However, Bill and Ben had actually foreshadowed the clay pits' existence in CGI back in Series 17.
We have to get back to the clay pits right away!
This is Ben Small and Martin Sherman's last role playing the UK and US Thomas in a special, as they would be recast in 2015. I think this is one of Ben Small's best performances in the series.
This is an emergency!
I hope we're still friends.
Percy! You have to get out of there!
Martin Sherman, on the other hand, is okay. But apparently, according to Martin Sherman, he left over pay disputes with Hit Entertainment. The animators clearly did a lot of research when creating the clay pits, such as having bodies of water for the clay, or the mounds of spoil here in the background. A lot of time went into making the clay pits feel authentic. I love it when movies like Journey Beyond Sodor or Blue Mountain Mystery really put that extra effort into making the industry more accurate. This is also Stanley's first appearance in the Brenner era, as he didn't appear in King of the Railway or Series 17, and for some reason he works at the clay pits, but only in this movie. Timothy and Reg are voiced by Tim Whitnell.
Well, there's a surprise. Bill and Ben are always playing tricks on other engines.
For those who don't know, he also voiced in another British train show, Underground Ernie, where he voiced Jubilee and Hammersmith in the show.
Osaka is coming today from Japan, and he's bringing me a present.
Tim Whitnell has also done other voice work for Thomas, such as trailers like Hero of the Rails,
See and hear Thomas and his friends brought to life like never before.
and The Great Discovery.
The all-new Never Before Seen Thomas and Friends DVD, The Great Discovery.
Timothy also happens to be Tim Whitnell's first full name.
Yippee!
Every time a new character is introduced in this movie, it always has someone being scared. Like, when we first meet Timothy, he gets shocked by Thomas.
Oh, hey, stop!
When Thomas first meets Marion, he gets jump scared.
Ah! What's that? Only me?
When Percy first meets Gator, he gets scared.
Oh, hello.
And when James first meets Reg, he is also initially scared of him.
Hello, mate.
Interesting how this movie about bravery has a scare scene each time we meet a new character. Speaking of scary, I would argue Tale of the Brave is one of the most atmospheric Thomas movies. Now, it's still quite tame, obviously, as it's a kids movie, but there's quite a few sequences in this special which go out of their way to scare you. So many moments where there are jump scares, or a character being in danger. The crew clearly wanted to play more with tone of the CGI series for the special, which I love. The blue livery that Timothy has here is very similar to the one that Bill and Ben got in Series 17. Now, I don't think this was an intentional reference to the livery or anything, but it does work well in retrospect that their alternative livery worked out to be Timothy's livery too. Timothy is based on an American oil burning engine, which actually worked in clay pits, and according to Sam Wilkinson, Andrew Brenner was the guy who found all of the bases for the new characters in this movie. Boko, Derek and Fergus do not appear at the clay pits, since they never made it into CGI. The crew probably at least considered them for the movie, but they didn't make the final cut. If I'm being honest, I think I would have preferred Fergus' return over Timothy. I just feel like there's more story potential with him, but that's just my opinion. In the trailer for the movie, the animation is different. There's no rain and the footprints are illustrated. That's not the only difference. There's also no fog at Brendam Docks. This Percy shot is different. Gator's lining here is different. The Marion meeting scene looks different. No lighting in all of these scenes for some reason. Even the line recordings in the trailer are different.
Hello? Is anybody here? Hello? Is anybody here? Footprints? Footprints?
The monster! I saw it! The monster! I really saw it!
Come on. We'd better find him before he gets into trouble. We'd better find him before he gets into trouble.
Wow, you're brave, Gator.
Wow, you're brave, Gator.
I must be brave.
I must be brave.
I'm guessing they made this trailer before the movie's animation and editing was finalized, and all these shots are seemingly rendered for the trailer. Interestingly though, this isn't the only alternative version of this scene. In the Landmarks of Sodor shorts, the angle of the rain is different here, and Thomas's trucks have a lamp. Now I know the animation differences aren't really a thing you missed, but it felt wrong not to include them. Despite being short, this is arguably one of the most important scenes in the movie. Thomas discovering the footprints here is the catalyst for the story. This is what kicks off the plot and sets up the mystery to be solved at the end of the film. The way Bill and Ben save Thomas here is kinda similar to how Fergus saved the twins back in Series 7, or the way the twins rescued the workers in Series 3. Despite being jokey characters, I like how they're shown to be more serious about landslides. Even in this later scene, they very clearly take rock slides in the quarry very seriously, which I like. It's like the one thing that Bill and Ben actually take seriously in this world. The intro for the movie is CGI with a sort of 2D filter, I think. And like many great intros, this one sets up a lot of things. The footprints, the Marion jump scare, Marion herself, Thomas shunting clay pit trucks, Percy running into a tunnel, Reg, Timothy, Bill and Ben, Gator, Topham, and even James are all set up. The silhouette that Topham makes here is a reference to the famous movie director Alfred Hitchcock, which is interesting since the Fat Controller's theme may have also been inspired by Alfred Hitchcock. Instead of using the logo for the film, they instead use text here, unlike the other Brenner Thomas films. Not really sure why, but it does make the intro feel unique. The movie also had many working titles, such as Tracks to Bravery, The Monster of Sodor, before just settling on Tale of the Brave. James's first line in the movie, claiming he is braver than Bill and Ben, saving Thomas from a landslide,
I'm braver than they'll ever be,
is ironic, considering he is the one who needs to be saved from a landslide in the third act. This not only sets up his character arc, but also him reappearing later in the special. Despite following Thomas in the story up to now, the actual protagonist is Percy, and this scene here is Percy's call to adventure, where Thomas tells Percy about the footprints in the clay pits. This sets up Percy's whole character journey in the film, and finding the footprints or the monster becomes Percy's goal later in the film. I absolutely love this unbroken shot of Gator passing by this body of water. The entire sequence is 25 seconds long. There is no narration, no characters speak, it's just 25 seconds of uninterrupted atmosphere and music. As I said, Tale the Brave was when the production crew really started to play with atmosphere and tone of the CGI series, and this scene is a perfect example of that. This is a rare example where the narrator doesn't explain what's going on in the scene. Percy questions who makes the footprints, and seeing Gator's figure is supposed to add to that mystery that he might be the monster. I imagine they used the narrator less in this movie so that they can have more quiet atmospheric scenes, or allow the characters to have banter with each other more, or just take in the atmosphere of everything that's happening on screen. As I said before, this bucket jump scare was set up in the intro of the movie. The bucket is also a Chekhov's gun. Chekhov's gun is a writing term that basically means if you show a gun in the third act, you set it up in the first act. And that's exactly what happens here, where Marion uses her bucket to save Percy in the final act, and it was set up here in this scene with Thomas. Marion is voiced by the amazing Olivia Colman.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Marion.
Olivia would later go on to have an amazing acting career and would even win an Oscar, so the fact that Thomas actually has an Oscar winner in it is pretty cool. Marion can be a bit of a fruitcake, but she is incredibly entertaining. According to Sam Wilkinson, Andrew Brenner was the one who found Marion's basis. She was based on a specific steam shovel who worked at digging at the Panama Canal. Even photos from the dig were used as references for her, such as her bucket design, for example, looks exactly like Marion. Marion's name even comes from the real-life Marion Steam Shovel Company in America, the same one that would work for the Panama Canal. Thomas claims here that he's seen a steam shovel before.
Haven't you ever seen a steam shovel before? Yes.
Many have taken this one line to be a direct reference to Ned, but personally, I think that's kind of fucking stupid. He is very clearly talking in vague terms here about steam shovels, and I'm pretty sure if the crew intentionally wanted this to be a callback to Ned, they would have just, you know, mentioned Ned by name. Also, the music that's heard here when we first meet Marion is the same music that plays at the end when Marion saves the day. Yet another connection between these two scenes. One thing I like about Timothy and Marion is that they're not new characters. Now, they are technically new to the special, it's just sort of implied that Timothy and Marion have worked here for a while, and we just never saw them because Thomas doesn't usually go to the clay pits. Most specials show every new character coming to the island, but not every new engine literally needs to come to the island in the special, so I appreciate how it's done here. In fact, nothing new technically really appears in the special. Like, yeah, the clay pits and the scrapyard are new sets, and all the characters are new, but the locations are places that we've already seen in the model series before. The only really new thing we see on the island is technically Gator, and he leaves by the end. This scene with Thomas sets up the rule of not being able to go past the danger sign.
Don't you go past the danger sign, Thomas.
This rule will later get broken by James and Percy at the end of the film.
It's not safe to go past danger signs.
Marion even jokes about digging Thomas out,
Unless, of course, you want me to dig you out.
which might be foreshadowing for when Percy has to be dug out by Marion at the end of the film.
You could dig me out first.
Of course I should dig you out first.
And also, Marion's line here about dinosaurs is also foreshadowing to the end of the film, where Marion explains what dinosaurs are.
Formed from the bones of a dinosaur.
This scene in the docks sets up Cranky as a character. They don't just pull him out of nowhere in the third act, he's actually set up here, where he says monsters aren't real and that Thomas and Percy are silly, only for him to be scared of the monster later, and he would later go and try help Thomas. When Percy first sees Gator, he says this.
Run away! Run away! Run away! Run away!
This might be a reference to Percy's first episode, Percy Runs Away, where Percy gets stuck on the main line and runs away from Gordon.
I won't stay here, I'll run away, he puffed.
I kinda said this already, but the cinematography in this movie is so much better than King of the Railway. This movie really plays around with the placement of the camera. Sometimes we'll get these super high shots, and other times the camera will be very intimate. They started using point of view shots a lot more. There's also a lot more handheld shots, where the camera will whip around. The shots in this movie are so much more dynamic, and I love them. Gator is based on a super obscure Colombian mountain engine. It was picked because of its shape and how it looked like an alligator, hence his name, Gator. The real-life engines they found for these new characters were so rare. Like, how the hell did Andrew Brenner even find them all? We don't even have a proper build date for any of them. Though 20 of Gator's bases were made, but all of them are sadly scrapped now. R.I.P. Gator. Gator also has some weird connections to Duck. Duck isn't Duck's real name, it's actually Montague, and when the Brenner crew brought him back to CGI, they re-established this with the audience. Meanwhile, Gator also uses the name of an animal. His real name is Gerald. But despite this, he still has the nameplate Gator? Why? As I said in the Journey Beyond Sodor video, the new characters were always required to have a name tag, so the crew probably just gave him the name tag Gator, and nobody really realized that was actually technically not his real name. For some reason, Gator's reason on Sodor is also never explained, which is weird since it seems like there are plenty of times in the movie when they could have explained it. Or perhaps the crew originally wrote a reason why, and they just decided not to answer it. Salty jokes that Thomas should have been called Sandy.
Or should we call you Sandy now?
Which is funny since Sandy would later become a Thomas character, albeit in All Engines Go. Percy's next step on the hero's journey is the refusal of the call to adventure. He refuses to be brave because of the footprints. He gets scared of Gator, he starts to get scared of pulling the mail train. He's even scared of a bump from the trucks, and refuses to pull the mail train.
Would you take the mail train for me? Just tonight?
Which represents his refusal of the call to adventure, and the refusal to go into the unknown world. This is also represented by the amazing Monsters Everywhere sequence. I really love how they use the pareidolia effect here. Pareidolia basically means to see faces and things, and here we see haunting haystacks, devious barn sheds, evil faces in the lamps, and even the signal box. It's so creative with how they made faces appear in the buildings, but still managed to keep it realistic. Speaking of which, the eyes and the footprints that show up here are also incorporated into the end credits of the film. The footprints are also a manifestation of Percy's fear of the monster, and the footprints become a reoccurring element in the movie. Marion sings about how she'd like to dig up buried treasure that's never been found.
I like to dig up, I like to dig down. I like to dig up treasure that's never been found.
Then, in the very next special after this one, Marion gets a whole side plot where she goes looking for buried treasure, only for her to actually dig it up with her bucket and dump it on Thomas.
The treasure! Marion, you found it!
Was this like intentional foreshadowing for lost treasure or something? Who knows, but still, a super cool coincidence. All the scenes of the clay pits with Thomas are him basically investigating everyone. The opening scene sets up Bill and Ben and Timothy, and a little later, Marion. And the 3 scenes we get here are Thomas investigating. When Thomas meets Marion, he tries to go past the sign, but Marion stops him. Then in the next scene, he asks Timothy, but Timothy doesn't know.
There aren't animals bigger than that on Sodor, Thomas.
And when Bill and Ben scare him, it prompts Thomas to ask Bill and Ben whether or not Bill and Ben had tricked him that night. But Bill and Ben get defensive by this.
That landslide was not a trick.
And Thomas kind of concludes that maybe the footprints don't exist at all. In this scene with Marion, we see Thomas looking for footprints in the trucks. But had Thomas been there the first time when Marion dug, he would have actually seen them, which again makes Thomas conclude that the footprints probably don't exist. James is pretty much introduced around the 20-minute mark. Something I love about this film is that the pace is pretty perfect. Thomas is introduced straight away, Percy's story starts about 10 minutes in, and James's story starts about 20 minutes in. Thomas getting confused that James will be scrapped
Send for scrap?
Oh, James!
is a reference to the interaction that Edward and Thomas had in Saved from Scrap.
I'm going to the scrapyard today. You're not that old, replied Thomas cheekily.
There's also way more comedy in this film than I remembered. Bill and Ben and their Timothy joke.
Oh, that's Timothy.
This joke with James is pretty funny. There's the gag with Topham's assistants helping him. Marion is hilarious. The Henry joke is funny. The James shed scene is amazing. James's It's Night joke is great. And Bill and Ben absolutely steal the show. This is where the scrap monster gets introduced, and I love how it's set up here at the start of Act 2, as the monster doesn't show up again until the start of Act 3. In fact, James getting scared of the scrap monster here is ironic, since he would later use this experience against Percy to scare him. This is also the first time we see Reg and Croc's scrapyard in CGI, and it seems to be based on the classic Series 1. Hell, there's even a crane in the yard in Series 2, which Reg seemingly replaced. One criticism I have is that this is Reg's only scene in the movie, which is weird since most Thomas movies tried to have all the new characters play a part, but Reg is sort of sidelined here. Perhaps if James had seen Reg making art sculptures in the yard, then maybe later James could have actually asked him to build the scrap monster, and then later Thomas would ask Reg if he was the one who built it. That might have been a better way to incorporate Reg into the plot, I think, but at least he still adds to the plot, as he was still the one who built the monster. Gator's line here is a reference to Toad's bright idea.
He needs me to collect some cars from Duck's branch line tonight.
However, in the episode, Gator was only told as he left, whereas here, he already knows he's going up to the branch line. Still though, a clever setup with when he meets James. And now we get the next step on Percy's journey, which is the meeting of the mentor. Now, Gator and Percy have met before, and Gator has seen him scared, but this is the scene where Gator opens up to Percy, and he explains how he too was once scared but learned how to be brave. The animation style here is also different, and it's never directly said which country that Gator comes from, or what supplies he was bringing to the village.
I was pulling trucks loaded with important supplies.
But with the Red Cross logo on the trucks, one can presume that it was probably medical supplies in Colombia. This scene is also powerful because of its reincorporation later. Gator's scared of crossing the bridge, and he's still scared of heights by the end of the film.
Pretty high up now.
But as Gator said here, just because he is still scared of heights, that doesn't mean he can't still be brave. In this scene here, Thomas's driver is actually voiced by Mark Morahan. Thomas's joke to Percy about Balloon on a flatbed is a reference to the episode Up, Up and Away, one of the worst episodes of Thomas ever.
Have you been asked to deliver a giant balloon on a flatbed? No!
After meeting with Gator, Percy is finally able to pull the mail train again. Percy finally accepts his call to adventure and goes into the unknown world. This parallels before where Percy was scared, like this shot of the haystack or this shot of the owl paralleled Percy's fear from before, only now he's become a master of the unknown world. This line from James, warning Percy about monsters, is ironic.
Monsters are hard to see in the dark.
Since he is the one who later gets scared of a monster. I really like how they characterize James here. He doesn't start out as the villain. At first, he only teases Percy about being scared of the monster, and for most of the second act, he's just grumpy about doing work. It's only when he gets scared, and when all the other engines start making fun of him, does James then decide to punish Percy out of resentment. But for the most part, James is actually pretty normal in this film. This scene of Gator would also take place during the episode Toad's Bright Idea, as I said. Though Percy and Gator somehow turn around to meet James, whereas in the episode they don't really do that. It's super cool that they did this, and I wish they did this more with other specials and episodes. The Flying Kipper crashing is a reference to the fact that, well, the Flying Kipper crashes a lot, though this isn't James's first time pulling it in the series. Exactly 30 minutes into the special, we hear this music. Which is the same music we heard at the start of the film, and it's also the music that we hear at the end. You gotta love how symmetrical the music is in this film. Henry's line about throwing fish back into the water
You're meant to deliver the fish, not throw them back in the water.
is a reference to Series 5.
Engines don't swim, Henry. You were meant to deliver fish, not swim with them.
Whoa, I guess Henry must have waited, what, 13 years just so he could say that line again? Although, interestingly though, when James crashed, the animators did actually have fish fly out of James's trucks, which is pretty funny. And it's because of this scene that James starts to become resentful. He was only jokey before, but this is the real turning point for his character. It was kinda to hurt Percy, but also to protect his own image to the other engines. It was his way of reminding who was really brave. Though, ironically enough, it's because of this scene that Percy is then able to prove to James later who is truly brave. This scene with Thomas and Percy is so sad, because you can kind of see it from both perspectives. Thomas knows through his investigations that the monsters probably aren't real, and I even think he gives a very reasonable response. But I can also see this from Percy's perspective. From Percy's perspective, what he saw was real to him, and when he said that he saw the monster, Thomas should have been there for him. I can totally see why Percy feels very betrayed by Thomas here, because he wasn't there for him in his hour of need. And now we get to the song Our Tale of the Brave. This song represents Gator and Percy's friendship. This song was also meant to be played at the end of the film, but was sadly changed out. I love this song because it has a great use of show don't tell. Tale of the Brave really started to use the narrator less, and a good example is this scene here, where we're not told that Gator is scared, it's communicated visually that Gator is scared of heights. We're not told that Thomas and Percy are fighting, it's shown visually. Again, a really clever way of using the visual medium. The drawing of the rock face here under the bridge is actually an illustration, as they started to do these sort of techniques in Series 18. Great Waterton is mentioned over the PA system here, despite not appearing in CGI. This line about the telephone is a callback to Thomas in Trouble.
Excuse me, sir. You're wanted on the telephone.
Oh, bother, that telephone.
Excuse me, sir. You are wanted on the telephone. Bother that telephone.
And would actually become a recurring gag in the Brenner era.
Oh, bother that telephone.
The music theme that's heard here would later be used for the Beast of Sodor.
The next day, the snow was even thicker.
Though to be fair, Robert Hartshorn often reused his older music. Thomas is usually the one who gets the films, so I really like that it's Percy who gets to interact with a new character. It's honestly a welcome change, if I'm being honest. I love how Thomas is written in the movie. He's still a bit cheeky, but not nearly as dickish as he used to be. The way Thomas looks out for Percy here is so sweet. Percy tries to run away with Gator.
Running away from your problems is not very brave, Percy.
This is a bit harsh, but it is true of Percy's character. He runs away when he sees Gator, he runs away from the trucks, he runs away from the scrap monster, and he even tries to run away from Sodor itself. Gator's words here is what prompts Percy to start to face his fears, and it's not until the final where Percy doesn't run away and actually faces up to his bravery. And now we get to the amazing action set piece with Cranky. What I like about the crashes in this movie is how they parallel each other. James hits into the scrap monster here, and so does Percy. The start of the movie has a rock slide with Thomas, and the end of the movie also has a rock slide. Marion's bucket foreshadowing gets paid off, and I also like how the crashes get bigger and bigger as the movie progresses. It starts out slow with the Timothy jump scare, and the rock slide, and the sandbags, and the truck jump scare, but then it starts to build with bigger and bigger crashes, like James's monster crash, and then James's other crash, and then Percy's crash with the monster, but then it gets even bigger with the Cranky scene, and then it gets even bigger again with the clay pit scene, which goes on for like 2 minutes. It's very well constructed. This scene has always felt a little redundant, since Percy was never actually on the ship.
Percy's not on the ship, Thomas!
I unloaded Percy half an hour ago!
It kind of feels like they had two ideas for endings, but weren't really sure which way to go. One with Percy going away from Sodor, and the other with him going down to the clay pits. And so it kind of feels like they just stuck the two climaxes in the finale. But this scene does have a purpose, because had Cranky and Thomas not stopped the ship, Percy would have never gotten that chance to say goodbye to Gator in the finale. So while Thomas didn't intend for it to happen, it is kind of sweet that Thomas's actions here is what caused Percy to get his goodbye with Gator in the end. Percy having trouble with warning signs is a callback to Percy Takes the Plunge.
He had trouble with going past danger signs before.
Speaking of callbacks, there are so many in this climax. Percy's line here,
I'm braver than you'll ever be.
is a callback to James's first line in the movie.
I'm braver than they'll ever be.
And then they go past the danger sign, which is also set up earlier with Marion. The way Thomas enters the quarry here is also similar to how he did in the opening of the film, and Percy discovering the footprint here, similar to how Thomas does in the opening, and the way that Percy saves James is very similar to how Bill and Ben saved Thomas in the intro. There's even a nice parallel to Gator's flashback here, because in Gator's flashback he looks back at the trucks before looking at the bridge and then deciding that he must be brave.
I decided I must be brave!
Meanwhile here, Percy looks back at Thomas before seeing James in trouble, and then he decides that he must be brave.
I must be brave.
Again paralleling Gator. Everything in the movie up to this point has built up to this. Percy has a choice. He can either run away like he has in the past, or he can face up to his fears. Percy proved that when his back is against the wall, he can be brave, even braver than James. Percy had such an amazing arc in this film, from him getting the call to adventure because of the footprints, but then he refuses the call and starts to get scared. Only then he meets the mentor represented by Gator, who convinces him to go into the unknown world. But then once in the unknown world, he has a test. This test causes Percy to be reborn as a character, where he has a revelation that none of his friends on Sodor care about him. He has the temptation to leave Sodor until Gator tells him it's not very brave, which causes Percy to go look for the treasure, or the dinosaur, where he then has his redemption by saving James, and then he returns to the known world in the steamworks scene, and by the end of the film he becomes a completely changed character. When Marion catches a dinosaur skull, she sings Alas Poor Dinosaur.
Alas, poor dinosaur.
This is a reference to the Shakespeare play Hamlet, where Hamlet takes the skull out of his old friend's grave and says Alas Poor Yorick.
Alas, poor Yorick.
For some reason, this is the only CGI movie to not have Victor in it, despite having a steamworks scene in this movie. Besides The Adventure Begins, Victor has pretty much appeared in every special. He even had a portrait cameo in Big World Adventures. This also parallels the opening scene of the movie. Where the movie opened with a ceremony thanking Bill and Ben for saving Thomas, this movie ends with a ceremony hosted by the Fat Controller thanking Percy for saving James. Sir Robert Norrenby is also here when making a speech, which is foreshadowing for when Sir Robert Norrenby opens up a dinosaur park in Series 18. And I also like how the dinosaur actually becomes a part of the Tidmouth set in that season as well. It's really clever. I really love Gator and Percy's dynamic here. Percy learned through Gator that he didn't have to run away and that he could face his fears.
For helping me learn that I could be brave.
While Gator also learned from Percy about his fears of heights.
I think I'm ready for the highest of high bridges now.
And this is such a good lesson to teach to kids too. Everyone has to go through this at a certain point in their life where they have to say goodbye to people that they love. This is a very real experience, and so I have major respect that they actually went there with the special. Percy's last line here is so interesting.
No, I thought of it all by myself.
Percy finally learns to think for himself. Before, Percy would copy what others say, like Gator's wise words or Thomas's line about monsters. It's a subtle way of him growing beyond Gator's wisdom. All of their arcs come together so beautifully in this finale. Everything about the movie is so well structured. The more I think this might be my favorite Thomas special. There's been other movies out there about Percy, or movies about Thomas, or even subplots about James, but this is the movie that really gets into the dynamics of these characters. The drama doesn't come from an external force like a crazy pirate or some evil diesel. The drama comes from the dynamics that these three characters have with each other. And at the end of the day, the focus should be on the characters. And I think Tale of the Brave has one of the most character-driven Thomas movies in the entire series. The drama isn't fake in this movie, it's real. The original song here that played at the end credits was Our Tale of the Brave, but was later changed to this. Having the film end on this song would have been perfect, as this song represents Percy and Gator's friendship. So having this song play just after they say goodbye to each other on the ship would have been a really clever idea, and it's a shame they didn't do it. But I don't mind la 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 let's be brave, if I'm being honest. This was also the first time that the voice actors were actually credited with who they voice. Usually they just show the cast list, so I really like how they do the credits in this film. And also, for some reason, William Hope's image is just a rock and not Edward. That's a bit weird. Percy has a funny line here at the end that you can only hear when you isolate his audio, where he says, "Go away, dinosaur."
Go away, dinosaur! Yes.
It's really random, but very cute, and a very good way to end the video. And yeah, that was Tale of the Brave. A perfect movie to watch around Halloween, especially the ending or the dynamics that the characters have, or all the callbacks or all the references. There's so much to dive into with this movie. And considering this came out 10 years ago and it is still aged like a fine wine, I think that's a testament to Andrew Brenner's great writing. So, thank you all for watching my video on Tale of the Brave, and I will see you all in the next one. Slán Abhaile.